All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. In Deshaun Watson's first 4 years in the NFL as a starting quarterback for the Houston Texans, he had stardom written all over him as he was well on his way to being one of the faces of the league. But things have gone south in a hurry for Watson, as he's now more than likely going to be remembered for having one of the worst contracts in professional sports, requesting a trade from the Houston Texans following the 2020 season. And then, of course, the allegations and so many lawsuits that accompanied him on his way out the door in Houston. And, of course, since he's been in Cleveland as well, he missed the entire 2021 season. And you think about it, after being traded to the Cleveland Browns in 2022, Houston received three first round picks, a third, and two fourths from Cleveland. And from there, we saw Watson get a fully guaranteed 5 year deal for $230 million from the Browns. Cole, what's going on, my man? You're saying irresponsible trade on Cleveland's end. Absolutely. And it's one of those where trades of this magnitude, when you're talking about the picks that you're giving up, on top of that, the money and the guaranteed money that you're paying somebody with the expectations for them to be certain for your team, and it doesn't work out. It's just like having a top 10 pick in the NFL draft and you simply blow it. It just sets your team back. And you just look at how hamstrung that the Cleveland Browns have been for this. Because, I mean, since Deshaun Watson went to Cleveland, he's been a shell of himself. In 3 seasons with the Browns, he's only played 19 games. So that equates to basically one season. Okay, he only has 19 touchdowns. He only has 12, and he has 12 interceptions to boot along with it. And even when he's out there, he just simply does not have it. Okay, and now we're talking about a guy who's missed time because of suspensions. So the timing hasn't been there. Then he had the shoulder surgery. Okay, and then we saw him tear the Achilles this past season, and then of course he just retore it again. So now already the 2025 season is in doubt. Okay. And I'm going to take it a step further. I think at this point, we might be talking about Deshaun Watson's career being in doubt because, for the sake of argument, let's say that Watson comes back healthy at some point during the 2025 season. We're now talking about a quarterback that's going to be about 30 years of age with shoulder issues. And on top of, the shoulder issues, we're talking about a guy who has had two Achilles surgeries. So where is that mobility? Where's that explosiveness? Where's that strength on that leg going to be? I simply don't see it happening. I mean, we just saw Aaron Rodgers, of course, a little bit older than Deshaun Watson, attempt to come back from an Achilles injury this past season for the New York Jets. And Aaron Rodgers was clearly not the same Aaron Rodgers. Okay. But nonetheless, I simply don't see a positive at this point for Watson as far as him being able to come back and be the player that he once was because the injuries, so many off the field issues, you name it, it just ain't happening. And, you think about it because Watson and the Browns had already restructured his massive deal. But like I said, the sand in the hourglass is running out on his once promising career. And it's unfortunate because he had, and I say had, all of the tools in the cupboard to be one of the best quarterbacks of this era. You think about that 2017 NFL draft. Of course, the Bears traded up to take Mitch Trubisky second overall at quarterback. Didn't work out there. We saw the Chiefs trade up with the Buffalo Bills to get to number 10 to take Patrick Mahomes that year. The rest is history. Okay. And then two picks behind Mahomes, Watson was taken by the Houston Texans. And now you just look back on it and all you can say is, wow. I mean, if you're the Cleveland Browns, you've already restructured this deal, but now you really must, and I say must, begin to start preparing for life after Deshaun Watson. Cleveland's got the second overall pick in April's NFL draft. Are they going to take a quarterback there? And if they do, is it going to be Shador Sanders? Is it going to be Cam Ward? Or is it going to be somebody else? Or do the Browns simply turn back later in the draft and look to address the quarterback position? We've got to wait. But I'll tell you like this: there have been many people for the longest time who felt like the Herschel Walker trade, once upon a time, that sent him from the Dallas Cowboys to the Minnesota Vikings, was the worst in NFL history. I think at this point, the Browns trade might be there because, yes, the Vikings never won a championship with Herschel Walker. And of course, we saw how the Cowboys were able to propel that into multiple Super Bowl championships. Clearly, the Texans have not gotten there yet. But at least the Vikings made the playoffs a couple of times with Herschel Walker at running back. The Browns, they got to the playoffs last year, but they didn't do it because of Deshaun Watson because he was hardly there. It was like, they relied on a veteran quarterback in Joe Flacco and, of course, their defense. This time around, I mean, you look at it, if the Browns are going to do anything in 2025, it's not going to be because of Deshaun Watson because I'm not even sure that he's going to be there at this point, period. And you just have to ask yourself, how did it get to this point with Deshaun Watson? And it's unfortunate for him. For so many of his off the field transgressions and the injuries. I mean, you could take your pick right there on this thing. And for me, some people might say, well, can Watson's career be salvaged at this point, or is he finished? I really, I really don't think that Deshaun Watson will ever be the same player. And it's unfortunate because we saw the talent collegiately at Clemson. We saw the talent, in those first couple of years with the Houston Texans. This was a guy who finished third in the Offensive Rookie of the Year voting back in 2017. He was a multiple time Pro Bowler with the Houston Texans. And if you're the Browns, you figured, okay, this is a slam dunk. This is no big thing. You've got a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback that doesn't want to be playing for one team. If you're the Browns, you feel like at that point, the only thing that was hindering you from keeping up with the Joneses in the AFC was getting a quarterback. Remember, once upon a time, they took Baker Mayfield first overall, and then by 2020, we saw that breakout season for the Browns. Then under first-year head coach Kevin Stefanski, they went 11-5. They won Cleveland's first playoff game in close to 30 years. Okay. And they really had every opportunity to get past the Chiefs that year in the playoffs. And then, of course, Baker regressed, and the Browns were ready to move on from Baker. And they figured, you know what? Let's get us a Deshaun Watson, and everything will be okay. And honestly, to me, in my opinion, I feel like things are worse for the Browns right now at quarterback than they were when they had Baker Mayfield because Baker Mayfield did get them to the playoffs, and Baker Mayfield was on a rookie deal. Now, I know things didn't work out for him there. He has new life with Tampa Bay. But nonetheless, you think back to that 11th hour as far as the Browns looking to get Deshaun Watson, and it came down to them and the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, it didn't work out for the Falcons. You could say maybe the Falcons dodged a bullet, but then we just saw Atlanta turn around and give all of that guaranteed money to Kirk Cousins, and they've been on the cusp of being a playoff team, but they're still not there either. But if you're the Cleveland Browns, like I said, with all of that guaranteed money, it's time for you to cut bait. And it's possible for you to go out there and still compete. I mean, you look at the Browns this past season, they were 3-14. And a lot of that plays back to the quarterback position or lack thereof it. You think to the Denver Broncos this past season under head coach Sean Payton. They were in dead cat purgatory and they still made the playoffs. So it can be done. But at some point, if you are the Browns, you have to cut your losses and you have to go forward. And I think they will, because I think heading into the 2025 NFL season, a lot of people's jobs are on the line in Cleveland. Front office, coaches, you name it. And at this point, you can't afford to sit up there and rely on a guy just because he's got guaranteed money coming his way. At some point, you just got to suck it up and say, hey, this ain't working out. TFX, what is going on? You're saying it seemed that the Browns were going to be great. They had Baker and Odell. Why did they get rid of Baker anyway? I never understood it. Well, I'll tell you like this, the Browns, unfortunately, as an organization, have not been able to get out of their way for a very long time. And when I say a very long time, probably since the Super Bowl did not have numbers attached to it. Okay. I mean, you think about it, so many times for so many years, the Cleveland Browns, they've been there and there's always been that yeah, but moment. You think about those yeah, but moments in the 80s, Red Right 88, the drive, the fumble, so many others. They finally got to the back to the postseason in 1994 with Bill Belichick, and then the next year, Art Modell decides to move the team. And of course, the Browns don't have an NFL franchise for about 4 or 5 years. And then the next thing you know, the original Browns, who are now the Baltimore Ravens, went on to win the Super Bowl in 2000. And of course, since then, they've gone back to win another one. And the Cleveland Browns, unfortunately, they're just an organization that just does not know how to win. I mean, they were flashy in 2000. I mean 2020. They got to the postseason and everybody said, "You know what? This team is ready and they're going to turn turn the corner." And I think Baker had a reality check waiting for him. Okay, Baker did show flashes, don't get me wrong, when he was in Cleveland. But I think, he got served a big slice of humble pie. It didn't work out there. The fans turned on him, you name it. And I think, going to LA in that brief period and working with Sean McVay really helped him out. Okay. I think he went to Carolina first, then LA. But I think at the end of the day, I think Baker's in the perfect spot for him in Tampa because there's simply no pressure for him. And unfortunately for OBJ, OBJ was never the player with the Browns that he was with the New York Giants. And of course, he was putting it together with the Rams that year that they won the Super Bowl until he got hurt. And unfortunately, I know he had one knee injury when he was in Cleveland as well. And of course, those knee injuries they've just caught up with him, and it's unfortunate to say the least. But I mean, you think about the Browns right now, and wow, I look at it right now. I think Deshaun Watson is finished. And I think again, if you're the Browns, you simply cannot afford to sit back and allow this to happen again. You look around the league, and I'm just going to change gears real quick. You look at the Atlanta Falcons. If the Falcons had simply just cut their losses earlier and said, hey, we can't play Kirk Cousins because he's hindering us. But they kept trotting him out there this season, and in doing so, it cost them a chance to make the playoffs and win that division. You look at the Denver Broncos, clearly different, a slightly different scenario. Sean Payton didn't bring in Russell Wilson, okay, but Sean Payton looked at the money and said, "You know what? I'm cutting bait on this." And again, you look at the Broncos with all of that dead cap money, they still went out there and made the playoffs this past season. So at some point, if you're Cleveland, you got to go out there and cut your losses. There's talent on this team. You got to figure out how you're going to keep Miles Garrett, one of your best defensive players, your all-time sacks leader, happy because he's tired of losing. Okay, and if you're Miles Garrett, you've seen a lot of losing in Cleveland. You've got to the postseason a couple of times, but you know what? You want to win, and if the Browns can't convince him of that this offseason, maybe it's time for them to move on from him, trade him, and possibly get some draft picks. I don't know, but there's talent in Cleveland and they should be better than 3-14, but still they've got to try to go out there and find themselves a quarterback. And I think they will, because if you're Kevin Stefanski, you now have 5 years under your belt with the Browns, and you've shown that you can get to the postseason if you have the right quarterback. I think 2023 was a prime example when they literally got Joe Flacco off of his couch to come out there and play quarterback for Cleveland. And of course, the rest was history. But at the end of the day, this is another example of buyer beware. at the quarterback position. And on top of that, buyer beware when it comes to doling out those trades and giving a lot of guys that guaranteed money. It's one of those things you really, and I mean really, have to make sure if you're one of these teams that the guy is a fit and is going to work. Why? Because too often we see quarterbacks who are part of a system, or if they're not part of a system, they're allowed to freestyle with what they do on the field and other organizations. And when you attempt to bring them into a system, they simply ain't ready for it. I keep harping on Russell Wilson. You think about it. He was perfect for the Seattle Seahawks and what they did. But when he had to come and be in a new system with the Denver Broncos, first with Nathaniel Hackett, and then, of course, with Sean Payton, he wasn't the same guy, albeit that Russell Wilson did play a little bit better in year two with Denver under Sean Payton than he did with Nathaniel Hackett. But at the end of the day, he was never a Sean Payton guy. And then at parts of this season right now with the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. So you really have to make sure that a guy is a fit. And unfortunately, I think that's part of the reason why it didn't work out for Deshaun Watson with Cleveland. And then the other thing, as far on top of that, the injuries and the key injuries, because now the shoulder injury and then multiple injuries to the Achilles. Deshaun Watson is never going to be the same. So I think if you're the Cleveland Browns again, big time full court press if I'm you on drafting a quarterback. I don't see them going out there and trying to do the free agent thing again because it really hasn't worked out. And I know people talked about Jameis Winston. Jameis is good for maybe a couple of games. And the problem is because Jameis is going to have games like he did against the Baltimore Ravens when they upset the Ravens earlier this season in Cleveland. But then you think about the games like the ones against the Denver Broncos in the regular season, where he threw a couple of key picks that cost the Browns that game. So I think you have to start fresh. You have to allow Kevin Stefanski to try to come in there and get his guy at quarterback as he's trying to salvage things. And it's just unfortunate for the Browns because, you know, Deshaun Watson injury aside, we know the importance of what Nick Chubb was to this team. And now, unfortunately for Chubb, the injuries are starting to, catch up with him as well. It's the Cleveland Browns. And you hate to say that a franchise is snake bit, but, so many times it's like they get so close and you think those Browns are ready to turn that corner and become an upper echelon team consistently in the National Football League, and they simply just can't do it. But as far as Deshaun Watson goes, I think this is a masterclass as far as making sure that a guy is a fit. He never was. He never became the leader that the Browns needed him to be off the field and on the field. And honestly, even in the times when Deshaun Watson has played for the Browns over the last 3 years, those brief times that he has played, how many times can you really say that Deshaun Watson looked like the elusive playmaker that he did once upon a time with the Houston Texans? It's never been there. So again, it's a bad look for the Browns, but I think at this point, this offseason, they've got to suck it up and hopefully for their sake and hopefully for their fans' sake, they already have things in the works as far as finding their next quarterback in 2025. If the Cleveland Browns really are ready to attach their wagon to the Deshaun Watson train for 2025, thinking he's going to come back and be the Deshaun Watson or older, we got to keep trotting him out there because of the fact of all the guaranteed money that he is receiving. I'll tell you like this: I don't know who the Browns are going to pick this April in the first round in the draft, but if they go out there with that mentality, as far as keep continuing to trot Watson out there for 2025, it's mid-January 2025. I can tell you already by 2026, they're going to be picking top five again. That it's that plain and simple. They've messed up on this thing for the last couple of years. They continue to mess up for it. But if you're the Cleveland Browns, you've got to say enough is enough, and it's time for us, no matter the cap hit, but you gotta go in another direction. You gotta start a new leaf, and you have to find something or somebody else to play quarterback for you other than Deshaun Watson. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Cole, as always, thank you for chiming in, and I always appreciate the support. TFX, as always, it's a pleasure. And I know I expect to hear from you as we get closer to the weekend when it comes time for the picks for the divisional round in the NFL playoffs. But nonetheless, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.